Every once in a while, guys, I like to bust out the retro consoles. Despite being the kind of person who has a high-end gaming PC with a VR headset, a high-end display, and pretty much a Steam library of like 200 something games at this point, sometimes I just want to reach out to the back of this shelf over here and just pull something off to play it. Like this. Banjo-Tooie. This is a perfect example of a game you could technically play with Game Pass right now on your PC through game streaming, but the version of it is the Xbox Live version, and this, being the original, has some interesting quirks that I ended up actually preferring. Because of that, the only way I can really play this game is to bust out a Nintendo 64, which I have two of. Let's say I wanted to play Wii Sports of all games. Here in this unmarked case, because Wii Sports didn't come with a case. Boom, we got a Wii. Or heck, even a Wii U. We can play a lot of games on these consoles, but any console before the Wii U on the Nintendo side, before the PlayStation 3 on the Sony side, and before the Xbox 360 on, well, the Xbox side, it's gonna have some interesting troubles. So today, we're gonna take a look at retro gaming in the current year, which is 2023, and I'm gonna show you exactly how to get it set up in a way that will be enjoyable. So, let's get right into it. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie. You're watching GreaterThanPie, and today we're talking retro stuff. Retro gaming in the year of 2023 is a bit more nuanced than it used to be. It used to be, you would just take one of these and plug in your console. This right here is a CRT TV. Stands for cathode ray tube, because there was literally a laser in the back of this thing that shot at glass and that drew pictures on a screen. Now, as displays got smaller and more compact, they moved away from the interlaced picture that was created using the cathode ray tube to a more streamlined, progressive image that was done through pixels and the changing of pixel colors, which is how our modern displays work. So when that change happened, there was a bit of a shift between analog and digital media. Surprisingly, the coax cable that actually gets also plugged into the back of these type of TVs is also the same type of signal that would come out of the RCA cables that you and I may be familiar with. RCA cables are those ones of yellow, red, and white. The red and the white one were actually audio channels for left and right, and the yellow one is the only one that actually carries video. Now, there was a less popular standard that was introduced towards the end of the life of RCA that actually included HD, of all things, and also 2 additional video cables. Now, if you ask any retro enthusiast what is the best way to play retro games, they're gonna tell you to pick up one of these. And I did just check on eBay, and the most expensive one that I saw was around $100. The biggest issue is going to be transportation and testing, since there are a surprisingly large number of these that could be broken, not working properly, or may not even be compatible with the console that you're trying to use, depending on its age. This one is a perfect model for kind of everything up till around the Wii. And that is because while it is a bit older, it has just about every function that I could need or use in a CRT TV playing retro games. So to test today, we're gonna actually use the GameCube because, well, it's my favorite console, and I think that it's a really good example of a console where a lot of games just, you can't play them anymore. And I'm actually gonna show you what retro gaming on the CRT actually looks like, because this is what it used to look like.
Now, I know this is gonna be hard to see, because, well, we're filming a CRT TV and cameras and CRTs don't necessarily go together very well. But when you look at this image, the one thing you'll notice is, despite a lack of aliasing, it's very difficult to distinguish individual pixels. And that is because the way that the CRT draws the picture, it actually blurs things together ever so slightly. That black bar that is being recorded on here is just because ever so slightly the camera is not able to record at the same refresh rate as the display. Now, if we bump this up to 60 hertz on the recording and with the display, we might be able to sync them up, but true to the form of this, we are recording at 30 frames per second and this thing is running at 60.
Now, of course, I hear you. I can't be expected to store this. My significant other would hate me for this. And I completely get it. Not all of us are lucky enough to be in a relationship with somebody who's literally named Gamer Guts. So you can, on the other hand, kind of find a nice middle ground between modern and retro displays like this one. This right here, which I can lift with one hand, is actually a Samsung TV that is still on the market. And it actually has RCA ports on the back along with HDMI. Now this bad boy is only 720p, but it is kind of sized to be 720p. And with a screen this size, it ends up working perfectly. Now when I'm playing retro games that are pixel based with like pixel art, and some of the older ones, like even on the Nintendo 64, I end up preferring the CRT TV, despite this having a higher resolution, comparable refresh rates, and a bit easier of a setup and takedown, and of course, a massive weight advantage. And that reason is actually fairly nuanced. When these games came out, they were designed actually around compensating for the CRT. Because of that, many of the pixel art styles that we now know and love as retro pixel art actually didn't look like that. They looked much smoother. For example, the Nintendo 64 generation was a weird midpoint where this stuff started to trickle out. And because of that, some games did actually have widescreen, some games had support for higher resolutions, but for the most part, they looked their best on a retro CRT TV, or well, would have been modern at that time CRT TV. Fast forward to the GameCube and you're in this really weird in-between generation. This is also the same generation that the PlayStation 2 would have come out, and even the first Xbox. And literally the next generation, which was the Wii from Nintendo, the Xbox 360, and the PlayStation 3, HDMI was everywhere except for on the Nintendo consoles. So there was this weird, awkward moment where things started to shift over, and there is where you're gonna find games that have some benefit to being on a display like this, and some that will benefit from being on a CRT. It all depends on how the developers were configuring the game in the first place. Now, of course, we could talk about the differences all day long, but here's the exact same game we were playing on the GameCube running on the Samsung.
Now moving up to the 720p screen does have some unfortunate drawbacks. For one, we're now having to rely on a resolution scaler built into the TV itself. Additionally, we've moved from the CRT to a flat screen LCD panel. LCD works by simply having different pixels that change colors to draw an image. Because of this, we can actually make out those individual pixels really easily. If you look at the lines on the buildings, you can see these jagged edges. Now, this is worked out with aliasing in the modern era, but before that was, well, a thing, we had this, and it just kind of looked a little rough. This might be what you're used to if you tried to play a console like this recently on your TV, because, well, that's the default now.
But I hear you. This is a PC tech channel. We have high-end displays for our gaming computers. Can we use those? Or our 4K TVs? Yes, you can actually. Surprisingly, it is easy to do. Especially with the GameCube and the Nintendo 64, of all things. And even really the Wii. Most of the Nintendo consoles have this feature. Let's talk about conversion cables. You see, conversion cables are a concept as old as, well, coax, as weird as it sounds. In fact, actually, the first time I ever had a TV in my room, it was so old that it actually had dials, and it was like a hand-me-down that was a hand-me-down that was like a hand-me-down. It was old, but I got Metroid Prime 2 running on that TV on my GameCube. And that is because, well, RCA is surprisingly easy to convert from and to. So going back, if you've got a TV somehow older than any of the ones that we've shown so far, yeah, you can get a little adapter. It literally plugs into the coax cable. It splits it into RCA. It works perfectly fine. There are two ways to do it. One is to get a blanket adapter that just works across everything. And while they do work, they don't always work. And I've found that the better way to do it is to get something like this. This right here is the Nintendo 64 and GameCube proprietary adapter to HDMI. The little processor in here does one thing and one thing only, and that is convert the analog signal to a digital signal that you can then plug into something else. This also has an interesting little feature where you can change it from 4:9 to 16:9. Depending on how you're plugging this in, play around with it. If you are going 16:9, it's going to stretch the image and it looks wonky. It really does. But I currently have it set to 16:9 for a very interesting reason. Because in addition to this, we got this. Now, if you guys don't remember seeing this, or you're new to the channel and you haven't seen this, this right here felt like the biggest scam product I bought last year. It's called the MClassic. And what it does is it upscales lower resolution images into higher resolution images through HDMI. And yes, like a Megazord, you can put them together and actually take this signal to 16:9, run it through retro mode, which will turn it back 4:3, and then output that to your computer. And because it's HDMI, you could just as easily plug this into a capture card, which I've done before and will do again. And you can even plug it directly into your gaming monitor itself. Now, the MClassic is not a miracle worker. And you know, it's probably better to show you than anything else.
Now, since this is the only one that we've converted to HDMI, this is the only one that I've got an actual direct capture for that isn't being recorded through, well, a camera. That being said, you can see from here, it's actually very interesting. Things look pretty sharp, and that's because, well, the MClassic, while not a miracle worker, does do its very best to take care of that aliasing. It's a sort of in-chain post-processing that can happen after the signal's been created. Now, with the interlay signal going through a conversion signal to HDMI and then going through the MClassic, there is some weird artifacting, such as a border around the screen. But at the same time, this is minimal compared to, well, the absolute nightmare that would be trying to capture this directly through an RCA cable. And this is actually being upscaled to 1440p instead of just, well, 720p. And it already looks better than the image coming off of the Samsung screen. In a way, I feel like this is somewhere between an authentic CRT experience and the Samsung display. It's not being displayed natively, but it doesn't have to.
As you can see, the conversion from RCA to HDMI isn't perfect, but it does work. And because it works, this will allow you to use just about any modern display that you could possibly want. Now, with the MClassic, this solution does come to like $120, so it's not cheap, but at the same time, if you're not willing to keep around retro displays, it is a good way to get everything compacted down into a relatively streamlined system. Now, there are more interesting and complicated ways to go about this, including universal boxes and conversion cables that are done through more complicated means. But at the same time, this is a pretty straightforward way that I think most people could actually do it. And well, I've been enjoying going back to some of these old games and playing them in their original quality on a CRT TV. In fact, actually, there's this picture that GamerGuts took with a Polaroid that looks like it was taken in the 90s. I guess really the big and important thing here is that despite being old, these consoles still work and can still be used. And honestly, that's all I could really ask for. You know, being able to go back and play something from my childhood, I mean, that's the point of retro consoles. It's the point of the nostalgia behind it. And while something like Super Mario 3D All-Stars can let me revisit the world of Mario Sunshine, nothing really compares to pulling out my GameCube, dusting it off, and, well, enjoying it the way that it originally was intended to be. But that is where we're gonna end it today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, because we're gonna play around with the CRT TV again. I actually really wanna see what happens if I try to play a modern system, like my gaming computer, on that TV. Also, I have another video in the works where we're gonna test if we've been gaslit into thinking that 1080p is dead. So if you're interested in any of those, get subscribed because they're gonna be coming up real soon. And of course, the biggest thing you can do to support us is just watching our videos, leaving a comment, and, well, kind of just sharing it in various ways talking about it to other people, etc. You guys are the driving force behind this channel, and I absolutely appreciate every last one of you. Thank you guys again. Wolfie, out.